My dear friends, may I speak with you about something that has been weighing heavy on my heart? There are truths I must share with you today, knowledge that has come to me through decades of witnessing what others cannot see, and I ask for your patience as I reveal what many would prefer remained hidden. You see, I have spent a lifetime observing the delicate threshold between this world and the next, particularly how it affects our most precious ones, our children. And what I am about to tell you may disturb you, but it is a warning that could protect your family from invisible dangers that lurk in the most innocent places. If you are a parent who has noticed something different about your child lately, a change in their energy, perhaps strange dreams, or an inexplicable fear that seems to have no source, then what I share in these next minutes is meant specifically for you. There is no coincidence that brings you here today. The universe has ways of guiding protective hearts toward the knowledge they need most. For over 50 years, I have been granted the ability to perceive beyond the veil that separates the seen from the unseen. I have witnessed how children, with their pure and unguarded spirits, become unwitting conduits for forces that should never touch our earthly realm. And today, I must warn you about something that appears as harmless as any other children's game, yet functions as a key to dimensions we were never meant to unlock. Before I continue, I must ask something of you. If this message resonates with your parental instincts, if you sense there are truths here that others might suppress or dismiss, please subscribe to this channel. This knowledge is not widely shared because it challenges what comfortable minds prefer to believe. But we who see beyond the surface understand that our children's protection requires us to acknowledge realities that make others uncomfortable. And when I finish speaking, I will ask you to share your own experiences in the comments. Tell me if you have witnessed unexplained changes in your child's behavior, because your observations may help other parents recognize the signs. Now, let me tell you about the game that has been spreading through playgrounds and sleepovers like an invisible infection. A game that masquerades as innocent fun while serving as a portal for entities that should never interact with young souls. Children, you see, are natural mediums. Their spirits are not yet fully anchored to this earthly plane the way ours become through years of material concerns and rational thinking. This is both their gift and their vulnerability. Where we see only a bedroom, they might sense a presence. Where we hear only wind, they might detect whispers. This sensitivity is why certain practices, even those disguised as games, can have profound and dangerous effects on their spiritual well-being. The game I speak of appears so simple, so harmless, that most parents would never suspect its true nature. It requires nothing more than a mirror, a darkened room, and the repetition of certain words. Children gather together, usually at sleepovers or during moments when adult supervision is minimal, and they perform what they believe is merely a thrilling dare. But what they are actually doing is creating a ritual. Yes, a ritual that opens doorways between worlds. This is not superstition, my friends. This is ancient knowledge that civilizations before us understood well. Mirrors have always been considered thin places, locations where the boundary between dimensions becomes permeable. When children combine their natural psychic sensitivity with reflective surfaces and repetitive incantations in darkened spaces, they create the perfect conditions for interdimensional contact. And the entities that respond to such invitations are not the benevolent guides we might hope for our children to encounter. I have seen the aftermath of these innocent games in the dreams and visions that come to me. Children who participated return home carrying energies that were never meant to inhabit young bodies. Parents notice their child becoming withdrawn, experiencing nightmares, or developing fears that seem to have no logical origin. The child might begin speaking of imaginary friends who seem unusually vivid, or they might start avoiding mirrors, feeling as though something is watching them from the other side. What breaks my heart most deeply is that these children often cannot articulate what has happened to them. They participated in what they thought was just a game, but their spirit recognizes on some level that a boundary has been crossed. They carry this knowing like a weight they cannot name, and their parents, unaware of the spiritual significance of what occurred, might dismiss their concerns as mere imagination or attention-seeking behavior. The specific game I am referring to involves children standing before a bathroom mirror in darkness, calling out a particular name or phrase repeatedly. They have been told that if they do this correctly, they will see something appear in the mirror behind them. What they are not told, what they cannot understand, is that they are essentially performing a summoning ritual, creating an invitation for entities from lower vibrational planes to make contact with our physical reality. These entities are drawn to the pure, unprotected energy of children. They feed on fear, confusion, and spiritual vulnerability. When a child opens this doorway through the mirror ritual, they are not just risking a momentary fright. They are potentially inviting an attachment that could influence their emotional and spiritual development for years to come. I have witnessed how these attachments manifest. The child might begin experiencing what adults mistake for behavioral problems, sudden mood swings, defiance that seems to come from nowhere, or an unusual fascination with dark themes. Their natural joy and lightness might seem dimmed, as though something is drawing energy from their youthful vitality. Sleep disturbances become common, not just nightmares, but a sense of being watched or followed even in their own bedroom. Some children develop an obsessive relationship with mirrors, either avoiding them completely or spending unusual amounts of time staring into them, as though searching for or communicating with something others cannot see. This is because the initial contact, made through the game, has established a connection that continues beyond that first encounter. Now, you might wonder why children are so drawn to these rituals in the first place. The answer lies in their intuitive understanding that there are mysteries beyond what adults acknowledge. In our modern world, we have largely dismissed the spiritual realm as fantasy, but children sense its reality instinctively. When they encounter games that promise to reveal hidden truths or supernatural encounters, they are responding to a deep human need to connect with the mystical aspects of existence. The tragedy is that their natural curiosity about the unseen world is being exploited by practices that offer connection to the wrong kinds of entities. Instead of learning to develop their spiritual gifts safely, under proper guidance and protection, they are opening themselves to influences that can harm rather than help their development. As parents, we must understand that forbidding such games without explanation will only increase their allure. Children need to understand why certain practices are dangerous, just as we teach them why they shouldn't touch a hot stove or run into traffic. The spiritual realm operates by laws just as real as physical laws, and our children deserve to understand these truths rather than discovering them through potentially harmful experimentation. In the coming segments of our time together, I will share with you the specific signs that indicate your child may have encountered something through these mirror games, and more importantly, what you can do to protect and cleanse their spiritual space. I will also reveal why this particular game has become so widespread in recent years, and what this tells us about the spiritual state of our world. But for now, I want you to consider this. If you have noticed changes in your child that you cannot quite explain, if there have been sleep disturbances, behavioral shifts, or an inexplicable sadness in their eyes, it may be time to investigate whether they have participated in games that are more than they appear to be. Trust your parental intuition. It is often more accurate than we realize. Stay with me, dear friends, because what I will share next could be the key to recognizing and healing whatever spiritual wounds your child may have inadvertently received. The knowledge is sacred, and it is meant for those ready to protect their families from the shadows that masquerade as innocent play. Listen to me carefully. After decades of walking between the seen and unseen worlds, after countless hours spent in the presence of spirits both benevolent and malevolent, I have witnessed a truth that chills my very soul. Children, precious, innocent children, they are not just vulnerable to dark forces, they are magnetic to them. You see, when a child enters this world, they arrive with their spiritual channels wide open. Unlike us adults, who have learned to close these sacred doorways through years of skepticism and material focus, children remain naturally connected to the invisible realms. Their third eye, as ancient wisdom calls it, pulses with clear sight. They see what we cannot see, hear what we pretend not to hear, feel what we have trained ourselves to ignore. But here lies the paradox that haunts my visions. This very purity, this spiritual openness that makes children so beautiful, so magical, also makes them perfect vessels for entities that hunger for innocent energy. Think of it this way. When you light a candle in complete darkness, what happens? Every creature in that darkness is drawn to the flame. The child's pure soul blazes like that candle, and both angels and demons take notice. I have seen this phenomenon countless times in my consultations. A mother comes to me, tears streaming down her face, speaking of her 7-year-old daughter who suddenly refuses to sleep alone. The child speaks of the shadow man who whispers her name. Another family seeks my guidance when their son begins drawing disturbing images after playing what seemed like harmless games with his friends. These are not coincidences, my dear ones. These are spiritual invasions masked as childhood imagination. The tragedy of our modern world is that we have abandoned the sacred protections our ancestors understood so well. Grandmothers once placed salt at thresholds, blessed their homes with prayers, taught children the power of divine names to speak when darkness approached. But today we live in spiritual nakedness, believing that science has replaced the need for divine protection. We hand our children electronic devices instead of teaching them how to shield their souls. When I close my eyes and reach into the spiritual realm, I see it clearly. Children in our time are like houses with all their doors and windows flung wide open, while parents sleep peacefully, unaware that uninvited guests are wandering through their child's inner sanctuary. The imagination of a child is not merely fantasy, as modern psychology suggests. No, imagination is the bridge, the actual pathway between dimensions. You must understand this. When your child plays pretend, when they speak to imaginary friends, when they create elaborate fantasy worlds, they are not simply being creative. They are opening portals. Their minds, unencumbered by adult limitations, can literally thin the veil between our world and others. And through these mental doorways, entities can slip through. I remember a vision that came to me 3 years ago. I saw a little boy, perhaps 6 years old, playing alone in his bedroom. He was moving small figures around, speaking in different voices, creating what adults would call an innocent game. But in the spiritual realm, I watched as his intense focus and emotional investment created actual energetic openings. Dark shapes began to gather around these openings, feeding off the child's concentrated attention, growing stronger with each moment of his play. This is why certain games become so addictive to children. It is not just psychological engagement, it is spiritual attachment. The entities that slip through these portals do not simply observe. They attach themselves to the child's energy field, influencing thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. They whisper suggestions that feel like the child's own ideas. They plant seeds of fear, anger, or rebellion that parents mistake for normal childhood phases. And here I must pause to address something that breaks my heart. The warning signs are everywhere, yet parents miss them because our culture has taught us to rationalize away spiritual realities. When your child suddenly becomes afraid of the dark after months or years of peaceful sleep, this is not developmental regression. When your gentle child begins showing aggressive behaviors they never exhibited before, this is not simply growing up. When your child begins speaking of friends that no one else can see, friends who encourage secretive or troubling behaviors, this is not healthy imagination. I have counseled hundreds of families where children report the same phenomena. Imaginary friends who know things the child should not know, who speak of adult topics, who encourage the child to keep secrets from parents, who appear only in darkness or during specific activities. These are not products of young minds. These are entities using the child's natural spiritual openness as a doorway into our physical world. The nighttime disturbances tell the deepest story. Children who once slept peacefully suddenly wake screaming of monsters in their room. They describe beings that stand in corners, voices that call their names, cold spots that appear without explanation. Parents, desperate to provide comfort, explain these away as nightmares or growing pains. But I tell you with absolute certainty, children see more clearly in darkness than we do in daylight. When spiritual attachment occurs, the changes in a child are unmistakable to those who know what to observe. Sleep patterns shift dramatically. The child may resist bedtime with unprecedented intensity, or conversely, may sleep so deeply that they cannot be easily awakened. Their drawings change. Innocent pictures of flowers and houses transform into dark images filled with shadows, strange symbols, or disturbing figures. Their play becomes secretive, intensive, almost ritualistic in nature. Perhaps most telling of all is the change in the child's relationship with sacred things. A child who once enjoyed bedtime prayers may suddenly resist them. Holy symbols that decorated their room may accidentally fall or break. They may express sudden fear or discomfort in places of worship. These are not rebellious phases. These are signs that something opposed to the sacred has taken residence in the child's spiritual space. But here is what gives me hope, what drives me to share this knowledge with you. Children's natural spiritual openness, the very quality that makes them vulnerable, also makes them incredibly responsive to proper spiritual protection. Where an adult might struggle for months to clear spiritual attachments, a child surrounded by genuine love, prayer, and sacred protection can heal remarkably quickly. The key is recognition followed by action. Parents must stop dismissing these signs as imagination and begin treating them as the spiritual emergencies they truly are. We must return to the ancient wisdom of blessing our homes, teaching our children protective prayers, surrounding their sleeping spaces with sacred symbols and divine invocation. As I prepare to share with you the specific game that has opened doorways in countless homes, remember this truth. Your child's soul is precious beyond measure, and dark forces know this. They target the young because children have not yet learned to guard their hearts and minds. But you, as their protector, have the power to close these doorways and restore spiritual safety to your home. The battle for your child's spiritual well-being begins with understanding that such a battle truly exists. When I first encountered the game that has infiltrated millions of homes worldwide, I felt the familiar chill that comes when the veil between worlds grows thin. The innocent name masks its true nature. Charlie, Charlie Challenge. Perhaps your child has whispered this name, or you've seen the simple pencil arrangement on their bedroom floor. What appears to be harmless fun is, in truth, a digital age resurrection of ancient summoning practices that our ancestors approached with reverence and fear. Let me share what my years of spiritual observation have revealed about this deceptively simple ritual. 2 pencils arranged in a cross pattern, balanced precariously, with yes and no written in opposing quadrants. Children gather, their young voices unified in a chant. Charlie, Charlie, are you here? The pencil moves. They giggle. They ask more questions. They believe it's just a game. But I have watched this pattern repeat across cultures and centuries, dear ones. The structure remains unchanged, an object of focus, repetitive invocation, collective intention, and the invitation for an unknown entity to communicate through physical manifestation. This is not entertainment. This is ceremony. This is ritual. This is summoning. Consider how perfectly this game mimics the sacred and dangerous practices of our ancestors. The cross formation of pencils echoes the crossroads where spirits traditionally gather, that liminal space between dimensions that shamans and mystics have long recognized as a gateway. The repetitive chanting creates the altered state necessary for spiritual contact, just as monks use repetitive prayer and tribal cultures use rhythmic drumming. The group energy amplifies the invitation, multiplying the spiritual voltage until something beyond their understanding can step through. What troubles my spirit most deeply is how children approach this ritual with complete innocence of its true nature. They lack the protective knowledge, the spiritual discernment, the energetic boundaries that traditional practitioners spent years developing. When indigenous cultures performed similar ceremonies, they prepared with fasting, purification, protective prayers, and the guidance of experienced elders who understood both the power being invoked and the dangers being courted. Your children perform these same actions with the casual energy of choosing a snack. They open doorways they cannot close, invite entities they cannot identify, and create spiritual contracts they do not comprehend. The entity that responds to Charlie is not the friendly playground companion they imagine. It is something else entirely, something that feeds on the pure energy of young souls and grows stronger with each successful contact. I have observed the psychological mechanics at work during these sessions, and they reveal why children become so captivated by this practice. The anticipation builds as they pose their question, their collective focus creating a unified field of intention. When the pencil moves, and it will move, for reasons both physical and metaphysical, the rush of seeming control over mysterious forces becomes intoxicating. They believe they have discovered a secret power, a hidden dimension of reality they can access at will. But here lies the deception that breaks my heart to witness. The children believe they are in control, that they can summon Charlie and dismiss him as they please. They do not understand that true spiritual contact follows laws older than human civilization, laws that do not bend to the whims of curious children. Each successful session creates a stronger connection, a clearer pathway, a more persistent presence that does not simply vanish when the pencils are put away. The viral nature of this phenomenon disturbs me more than any single occurrence could. Watch how it spreads through schools like wildfire, friend group to friend group, playground to sleepover to classroom. This is not merely social contagion. This is spiritual contamination, spreading through the innocent social networks of our children. One successful session inspires 10 more. One child's experience becomes the catalyst for an entire classroom's experimentation with forces beyond their comprehension. I have spoken with mothers who describe the change in their homes after their children played this seemingly innocent game. The atmosphere shifts. Sleep becomes restless. Shadows seem to move differently. Children who once slept peacefully now resist bedtime, speaking of whispers in the darkness or movements in their peripheral vision. What began as giggles in the afternoon becomes terror in the night. The technological age has transformed ancient practices in ways that multiply their danger. Where traditional summoning required knowledge passed down through generations, your children now learn these techniques from viral videos, with no understanding of protection, boundaries, or spiritual hygiene. Where ancestral wisdom included elaborate closing ceremonies to safely end spiritual contact, your children simply walk away when they grow bored, leaving energetic doorways wide open. And here is what the modern world refuses to acknowledge. The entities that respond to these casual invitations are not bound by our dismissal. They do not respect our ignorance as excuse for poor spiritual boundaries. They operate according to universal laws of energy and invitation that remain constant whether we believe in them or not. A door opened carelessly remains open until deliberately closed with proper understanding and intention. I witness parents who laugh off their children's reports of mysterious movements or strange dreams following these game sessions, dismissing such accounts as imagination or coincidence. But I have learned to recognize the patterns that repeat when spiritual boundaries have been compromised. The child's energy changes, their sleep patterns shift. They become drawn to increasingly dark or rebellious interests. Their emotional stability fluctuates in ways that puzzle loving parents who cannot identify the source of the disturbance. The cruel irony is that children are naturally more spiritually sensitive than adults, more open to energetic influences, more susceptible to spiritual attachment. Their innocence, which should protect them, instead makes them more vulnerable to entities that seek to influence pure hearts and impressionable minds. What appears to be harmless curiosity becomes an unintended invitation for influences that do not honor the sacred trust of childhood. Yet parents remain largely unaware because the danger operates in spiritual dimensions that our materialistic culture has taught us to ignore or dismiss. We recognize physical threats to our children instantly: the speeding car, the questionable stranger, the unsafe playground equipment. But we have lost the ancestral wisdom that once protected communities from spiritual dangers that are equally real and potentially more devastating to a child's long-term well-being. The entities that masquerade as Charlie or other friendly spirits understand exactly what they are doing. They present themselves as playful, harmless, entertaining, everything necessary to gain access to young hearts without triggering parental concern or protective instincts. They know that parents who would never allow their children to play with fire will unknowingly permit them to play with spiritual forces far more dangerous than any physical flame. If you have discovered that your child has participated in these sessions, please do not panic, but do not dismiss the situation either. The spiritual realm responds to authority exercised with love, knowledge, and proper intention. There are ways to close what has been opened, to cleanse what has been contaminated, to restore spiritual safety to your home and family. Stay with me as I reveal the specific steps you must take to protect your household from these influences, and why immediate action creates the strongest spiritual boundaries around your precious children. The children come to me. Their eyes carry shadows that no earthly medicine can heal. In my 40 years of walking between worlds, I have witnessed what happens when innocence opens doors that should remain sealed forever. Today, I must share with you the evidence that haunts my very soul. There was a girl named Sarah, only 8 years old, when her mother brought her to me. She hasn't slept through the night in 3 months, the mother whispered, her voice trembling. She draws pictures of figures with no faces, speaks to empty corners, and she knows things she could never know. The mother showed me Sarah's drawings, dark figures surrounding children at play, shadowy hands reaching from beneath beds, symbols that made my spirit recoil. This was not imagination. This was documentation of spiritual invasion. Sarah had played a game called Mary Mary with friends at a sleepover, a game where children gather in a circle, hold hands, and chant for spirits to join their play. The other children laughed and moved on. But Sarah's energy field was different, more open, more receptive, and something ancient and hungry had noticed. When I looked into Sarah's aura, I saw the attachment immediately, a parasitic entity feeding on her innocence, growing stronger with each passing day. Her sleep patterns were disrupted because spiritual oppression intensifies during the vulnerable hours when consciousness relaxes its guard. The personality changes her mother described, sudden aggression, uncharacteristic lying, withdrawal from family affection, these are classic signs of entity influence over a developing mind. You see, my dear ones, when children engage with spirit games, they often experience what I call the progression of spiritual intrusion. It begins with curiosity, that natural human desire to touch the mystery. Then comes contact, the moment when the veil thins and something responds. What starts as giggles and excitement quickly transforms into genuine supernatural phenomena. Doors opening by themselves, voices in empty rooms, objects moving without explanation. But here is where the true danger reveals itself. After contact comes attachment. The entity, having tasted the pure energy of a child's spirit, does not simply depart when the game ends. It lingers. It feeds. It begins to influence thoughts, emotions, and behaviors from within the child's energy field. I have seen this pattern repeat itself countless times. Another case haunts me still. A boy named Michael, whose grandmother brought him to me after months of unexplained phenomena. Michael had participated in a Ouija board sleepover at age 10. Within weeks, he began experiencing night terrors so intense that he would wake screaming about the man in the corner who wanted him to come play in the dark place forever. His behavior during daylight hours became increasingly disturbing. This gentle child began displaying sudden bursts of rage, using language he had never heard, knowing details about deceased relatives he had never met. His academic performance plummeted. His friendships dissolved, as other children became inexplicably afraid to be near him. When traditional psychology fails, and it always does in these cases, families become desperate. Therapists speak of trauma, anxiety disorders, behavioral problems. They prescribe medications for symptoms while remaining blind to the true cause. How can earthly medicine heal a spiritual wound? How can psychology address the influence of entities that exist beyond the physical realm? The medical establishment cannot measure spiritual oppression with their instruments. They cannot detect the energetic parasites that attach to innocent souls through supernatural games. Yet the evidence surrounds us if we have eyes to see it. I remember another case, twin sisters, Emma and Lily, both 12 years old. They had played a game called Bloody Mary at a school slumber party, taking turns standing alone in the bathroom mirror, chanting the ancient summoning words. Within a week, both girls began experiencing identical phenomena, despite living in separate homes with divorced parents. They both started waking at 3:33 a.m. every night, the hour when the veil between worlds grows thinnest. They both began drawing the same disturbing images without knowing the other was doing so. They both developed an irrational fear of mirrors and refused to be alone in bathrooms. Most disturbing of all, they both began speaking about the lady in the mirror who promised to show them secret games that only special children could play. The progression I witnessed in these twins revealed how spiritual entities work systematically to increase their influence. First comes the sleep disruption, weakening the child's natural spiritual defenses through exhaustion. Then comes the fear programming, creating anxiety states that make the child more vulnerable to manipulation. Finally comes the recruitment phase, where the entity begins grooming the child to involve other innocent souls in supernatural activities. But perhaps the most chilling case I ever encountered involved a group of 6 children who had played what they called the elevator game, a ritual where players attempt to travel to another dimension through a specific sequence of elevator button presses. These children, ranging in age from 9 to 13, had performed this ritual together at an apartment building during a birthday party. Within 2 weeks, all 6 children began exhibiting synchronized behavioral changes. They would all become agitated at the same times of day. They would all experience headaches during specific hours. Most disturbing of all, they began drawing maps of the same impossible building. Floors that shouldn't exist, hallways that led nowhere, rooms filled with watching figures. Their parents, desperate and confused, brought them to me together. When I examined their energy fields, I discovered they were all connected to the same entity, a powerful consciousness that had used their innocent game as an invitation to establish multiple anchor points in our reality. Through these 6 children, this dark force was building a network, preparing for something far more sinister than mere haunting. The entity was using these pure souls as bridges, planning to bring more of its kind through the dimensional barriers the children had unknowingly weakened. Each child had become a spiritual doorway, and their combined energy was feeding something ancient and malevolent that viewed our world as territory to be conquered. These are not isolated incidents, my beloved listeners. These are patterns I have witnessed again and again throughout my years of spiritual service. Children today face supernatural dangers that previous generations could never have imagined, and parents remain tragically unaware of the true nature of these threats. If you recognize these signs in your own children, the sleep disturbances that begin suddenly, the personality changes that cannot be explained through normal childhood development, the knowledge of things they could never have learned, the fear of specific objects or locations that once brought them joy. Please understand that you are not alone in this struggle. The entities that attach through supernatural games are real. They are intelligent, and they are patient. They understand that children's energy fields are more malleable, their spiritual boundaries less developed, their natural psychic abilities more accessible. They target innocence because innocence is power, and power corrupted serves their dark purposes. Stay with me, dear ones, because what I must share next will reveal why these spiritual invasions are becoming more frequent and more dangerous with each passing year. But how do we recognize when these innocent games have opened doorways that should remain closed? How do we distinguish between a child's natural curiosity and something far more concerning taking root in their tender spirit? In my years of walking between the seen and unseen worlds, I have witnessed the subtle ways darkness can enter a child's life. It rarely announces itself with dramatic displays. Instead, it whispers, it shifts, it changes the very essence of who your child is, so gradually that you might dismiss the signs as normal growing pains. But a mother's heart knows. A father's spirit senses. There is an ancient wisdom within every parent that can detect when something has shifted in their child's energy field. The body speaks first, always. Children who have encountered spiritual interference often exhibit a profound exhaustion that sleep cannot cure. You will notice your vibrant, energetic child suddenly requiring more rest, yet waking tired, as if their spirit has been traveling to places it should not go during the night hours. Their appetite changes in ways that defy logic. Perhaps they develop sudden aversions to foods they once loved, or crave things that seem almost compulsive. Most telling is their reaction to sacred imagery or religious symbols. A child who once felt comfort in prayer might suddenly flinch at the sight of crosses or feel physically uncomfortable in places of worship. Watch their eyes, dear ones. The eyes are windows not just to the soul, but to what may be influencing that soul. You might notice dark circles that persist despite adequate rest, or a quality of distance in their gaze, as if they are looking through you rather than at you. Some children develop an unusual sensitivity to light, preferring dimness when they once sought brightness. Others might complain of headaches or unexplained physical discomfort that medical examination cannot explain. But perhaps you've noticed something even more concerning. Has your child's emotional landscape shifted like weather before a storm? The sweet, gentle spirit you knew begins displaying sudden bursts of anger that seem disproportionate to any trigger. They might become aggressive toward siblings or pets in ways that shock you, showing a cruelty that feels foreign to their nature. These are not typical childhood tantrums. There is an intensity, a coldness that chills you to observe. Fear becomes their companion in ways that feel unnatural. Not the healthy caution that protects children, but paralyzing terror of things they cannot name. They might refuse to enter certain rooms of your home, or become hysterical at bedtime, claiming things are watching them. Some children develop phobias of religious imagery, recoiling from bedtime prayers or family devotions they once participated in willingly. Others become obsessed with death, asking disturbing questions about darkness and pain that's seen beyond their years. Most heartbreaking is the withdrawal. Your open, communicative child begins building walls, creating distance where there once was trust. They might stop sharing their daily experiences, become secretive about their games or thoughts, or show preference for isolation over family connection. This isn't typical teenage independence. It's a pulling away that feels spiritually charged, as if something is deliberately severing the bonds of love and trust that once flourished. Are you beginning to recognize patterns? Trust that recognition, even when others dismiss your concerns as parental anxiety. The spiritual indicators are perhaps the most crucial to understand. Children under spiritual influence often develop a resistance to prayer or spiritual practices that once brought them comfort. They might become physically agitated during family devotions, claiming sudden illness or finding urgent distractions. Some refuse to enter houses of worship or react with unexpected fear or anger to religious music or imagery. You might notice an attraction to darker themes in their play, art, or entertainment choices. The innocent games give way to fascination with violence, death imagery, or occult symbols. They might begin drawing disturbing pictures, creating scenarios in their play that involve darkness, fear, or harm. Listen carefully to their language. Children under spiritual influence sometimes use words or expressions they couldn't have learned naturally, or speak with inflections that don't match their usual voice patterns.
Some children begin speaking during sleep in voices that don't sound like their own, or wake with knowledge of things they shouldn't know. Others develop an uncanny ability to sense family tensions or hidden information, as if something is feeding them awareness beyond their natural capacity. These gifts, while they might seem impressive, often come with a cost to the child's peace and innocence. But here is what I must share with urgent tenderness. Your parental intuition is not imagination. When something feels spiritually wrong with your child, when your heart whispers warnings that your mind tries to dismiss, listen. That inner knowing is ancient wisdom, a protective instinct that has guided parents for millennia. It is the same intuition that makes you check on a sleeping child without understanding why, that makes you take a different route home on an ordinary day, that makes you call just when someone needs to hear your voice. This intuition operates beyond logic, beyond what can be measured or proven. It senses shifts in spiritual atmosphere, recognizes when the energy around your child has changed in ways that threaten their well-being. When you feel this spiritual unease, don't dismiss it as overprotective parenting. Your spirit is detecting what your eyes cannot see. However, we must distinguish between genuine spiritual interference and normal childhood development. Children naturally go through phases of challenging behavior, emotional ups and downs, and periods of withdrawal as they grow. The difference lies in the intensity, the suddenness, and the spiritual quality of these changes. Normal childhood rebellion feels human. There's hurt, confusion, or testing of boundaries that you can understand, even when it's difficult. Spiritual interference carries a different energy. There's a coldness, an otherness, a quality that makes you feel like you're no longer dealing with just your child, but with something influencing them. Normal growing pains respond to love, patience, and consistent boundaries.
Spiritual interference often escalates in response to these same caring approaches. Trust the timeline as well. Natural developmental changes usually occur gradually, giving you time to adjust and understand. Spiritual interference often manifests suddenly, dramatically altering your child's personality, behavior, or spiritual responses in ways that feel jarring and inexplicable. Most importantly, normal childhood challenges don't typically involve reactions to spiritual or religious elements. A child going through natural growth might resist authority or test rules, but they don't usually develop sudden aversions to prayer, religious imagery, or spiritual practices that once comforted them. As we continue this journey together, remember, recognizing these signs is not about fear, but about protection. It's about understanding that your love for your child includes guarding not just their physical and emotional well-being, but their spiritual safety as well. In the next moments, I will share how to respond when you recognize these patterns, how to reclaim your home's spiritual atmosphere, and how to restore your child's natural protection. Stay with me, for what comes next could change everything about how you safeguard those you love most. Now that you understand the urgency of this spiritual threat, let me guide you through the sacred work of reclaiming your home. I have walked countless families through these dark valleys, and I tell you this truth: there is no battle too fierce when love and divine light stand united. The first step, my dear ones, requires immediate action. Tonight, before sleep takes you, you must remove every trace of these spirit-calling games from your sanctuary. Do not simply hide them. Do not give them to neighbors thinking you do good. These objects carry residual energy, like smoke clinging to fabric after fire. I have seen families donate cursed items only to have darkness follow them to new homes, creating wider circles of suffering. When you gather these materials, wear something blessed, a cross, a prayer shawl, anything that connects you to divine protection. Touch each item with reverence for the lesson it taught you, but with firmness for the boundary you now create. Some parents tell me they feel foolish performing this ritual, but I have observed this: the spiritual realm responds not to our understanding, but to our intention. Place everything in a large bag or box. Add blessed salt if you have it, or regular salt while speaking words of cleansing over it. Salt has been humanity's purifier for millennia, not by accident, but by divine design. The earth provides what we need for spiritual warfare, if we have eyes to see. But removal alone creates only an empty space, and empty spaces call to be filled. This is where most families fail in their spiritual housekeeping. They clear the darkness, but forget to invite the light, leaving their children vulnerable to whatever energy seeks entry next. The protective barriers you create must be both physical and spiritual. Walk through your home with blessed salt, sprinkling it at every threshold, doorways, windows, even air vents if your intuition guides you there. As you walk, speak protection over each space. You need not use ancient languages or perfect prayers. The universe responds to the heart's sincerity more than the tongue's eloquence. I remember visiting a mother in rural Bulgaria whose daughter had been playing with spirit boards found in her grandfather's attic. The child spoke of seeing shadows that moved independently, of hearing whispers in empty rooms. When we cleansed that house, we discovered the grandfather had been involved in occult practices decades earlier. The games were merely awakening what had long been dormant. We placed blessed icons in every corner, not as decoration, but as spiritual sentries. Orthodox tradition teaches us that sacred images carry the presence of what they represent. Whether your faith tradition uses crosses, blessed oils, or prayer scrolls matters less than your belief in their protective power. Your child's room requires special attention, for this is where their most vulnerable hours unfold. Children process spiritual encounters during sleep when the conscious mind cannot filter what the soul experiences. I have witnessed dark entities specifically targeting children's bedrooms, knowing these sacred spaces hold the deepest influence over developing spirits. Wash all bedding in water blessed with prayer or salt. As you make the bed, visualize white light filling every fiber, every thread becoming a barrier against unwelcome energies. Replace any toys or books that feel heavy in your hands. Trust this sensation, for your maternal intuition recognizes what your mind might dismiss. Create new bedtime rituals that invite protection. Light a blessed candle as you read holy stories or speak words of love and safety. The flame represents divine presence, pushing darkness to the periphery. Some traditions use smudging with sage or sweetgrass, but I have found that any aromatic herb burned with pure intention carries cleansing power. This brings me to perhaps the most crucial element: family unity in spiritual battle. Dark forces seeking entry into homes target the weakest links, often creating division between parents and children or between spouses who disagree on spiritual matters. I have observed this pattern repeatedly. One parent recognizes the spiritual threat, while the other dismisses it as superstition. The entities use this division, amplifying doubt and creating chaos that obscures their true activity. If you find yourself facing such opposition within your own household, do not engage in arguments that feed the very discord these forces desire. Instead, lead through example. Begin your own spiritual practices without demanding others join. Pray for your family's protection while they sleep. Cleanse spaces quietly, with love rather than fear motivating your actions. Often I have seen the most skeptical family members gradually recognize changes in the home's atmosphere, a lightness where heaviness once dwelled, peace where tension previously reigned. Children especially respond to unified parental intention. When both parents stand firm in protecting their home's spiritual climate, children feel this security in their bones. They sleep more peacefully, play more joyfully, and naturally lose interest in activities that no longer align with the home's elevated energy. But what happens when the spiritual contamination runs deeper than surface cleansing can address? There are signs that tell us when professional intervention becomes necessary, and recognizing these signs could spare your family weeks or months of continued torment. If cleansing rituals consistently fail to bring peace, if blessed objects are mysteriously moved or damaged, if family members experience ongoing nightmares or unexplained illnesses, these symptoms suggest roots that require more experienced hands to address. I do not speak lightly of calling spiritual authorities, priests, rabbis, imams, or experienced spiritual counselors from your tradition. But I have walked through homes where amateur attempts at cleansing only agitated dormant entities, making situations more dangerous rather than resolved. Professional spiritual intervention often involves deeper rituals of consecration, extended periods of prayer and fasting, and sometimes the blessing of not just objects, but people themselves who may have inadvertently formed spiritual attachments through their participation in these games. Remember, seeking help demonstrates wisdom, not weakness. Even in my years of experience, I consult with others when facing particularly complex spiritual situations. The universe works through community, through the gathering of faithful hearts united in purpose. As you undertake this sacred work of reclaiming your home, expect resistance. You may feel suddenly tired when beginning cleansing rituals, or find yourself making excuses to postpone this vital work. These are not coincidences, but signs that you are approaching something that truly needs to be addressed. Document what you experience during this process. Note changes in your family's mood, sleep patterns, or overall sense of well-being. This record becomes both encouragement for your own faith and testimony for other families who may face similar battles. The path of spiritual housekeeping requires persistence, but its rewards extend far beyond simply removing unwanted influences. Families who consciously create sacred spaces often discover deeper connections with each other, clearer intuition about life's important decisions, and a sense of divine presence that transforms ordinary moments into opportunities for grace. Stay with me now, for in our next moments together, I will share the most powerful spiritual practices that not only cleanse, but fortify your home against future intrusions. Ancient wisdom that creates lasting protection for those you hold most dear. Ancient wisdom teaches us that protection is not built in moments of crisis, but cultivated in seasons of peace. As I observe families navigating this delicate balance between awareness and fear, I witness a profound truth emerging. The strongest spiritual immunity develops not through rigid rules or constant vigilance, but through the gentle cultivation of discernment and sacred practice woven naturally into daily life. You see, children possess an innate spiritual sensitivity that we adults often envy. Their souls remain open, receptive, naturally attuned to energies that surround them. This gift becomes their greatest strength when properly nurtured, yet their most vulnerable point when left unprotected. The question that haunts many parents in my presence is this: how do we teach our children to recognize spiritual danger without planting seeds of fear that grow into anxiety and paranoia? In my years of spiritual counsel, I have witnessed families transform this challenge into their greatest opportunity for growth. The path forward requires what I call conscious innocence, maintaining your child's natural wonder while awakening their inner wisdom to discern between light and shadow. Begin with simple conversations during everyday moments. When your child asks about dreams, nightmares, or unusual experiences, listen with your full presence. Children often report spiritual encounters without the vocabulary to understand what they've experienced. Your response in these moments shapes their relationship with the unseen realm for years to come. I recall a mother who shared her 7-year-old daughter's recurring nightmare about shadow people visiting her room. Rather than dismissing these experiences or creating elaborate protection rituals that might increase her daughter's fear, She taught her a simple truth. Light is always stronger than shadow. When you feel scared, you can call on your inner light and ask for protection from the angels who love you. The transformation was remarkable. Within weeks, the child not only overcame her nightmares, but began naturally avoiding games and activities that felt heavy or wrong to her spirit. This is the power of teaching discernment rather than rules. It creates internal guidance systems that function throughout life. Family spiritual practices need not be complicated to be effective. The most powerful protection often emerges from simple, consistent rituals that everyone can participate in, regardless of age. Morning gratitude circles, evening blessing prayers, weekly family meditation time, these practices create what I call spiritual muscle memory in your household. One practice I particularly recommend involves teaching children to sense the energy of spaces and objects. This skill proves invaluable when they encounter questionable games, activities, or even friendships. Teach them to pause before engaging with new influences and ask themselves, does this feel light or heavy? Does this bring peace or confusion to my heart? Consider implementing a weekly family spiritual cleansing routine that becomes as natural as cleaning house. Light a white candle together, speak words of blessing over your home, and invite each family member to share anything that felt off during the week. This creates safe space for children to report uncomfortable experiences without feeling they're in trouble or causing family alarm. Many parents ask me about maintaining vigilance without crossing into unhealthy paranoia. The distinction lies in understanding that spiritual protection comes from strengthening your family's light, not from constantly battling darkness. When you focus primarily on building spiritual immunity through positive practices, you naturally repel negative influences without creating an atmosphere of constant fear. I often share the analogy of physical health. We don't live in terror of every germ we might encounter. Instead, we maintain healthy habits, good nutrition, exercise, adequate rest that strengthen our immune systems. Spiritual immunity functions similarly. Regular prayer, meditation, gratitude practices, and conscious connection with divine presence create internal strength that naturally resists spiritual toxicity. The key is teaching your children to trust their inner guidance while providing them with practical tools for spiritual hygiene. Simple practices like washing hands while visualizing releasing any negative energy picked up during the day, or saying a brief prayer before entering new environments, become second nature when introduced with love rather than fear. Building a support network of spiritually aware parents in your community proves invaluable in this journey. You need not feel isolated in your concerns or alone in your commitment to spiritual parenting. Seek out families who share similar values, perhaps through spiritual communities, homeschool networks, or conscious parenting groups. When parents collaborate in creating spiritually healthy environments for their children, the collective energy becomes exponentially more powerful. Children benefit from seeing that spiritual awareness is normal, shared by other families they respect and admire. I encourage parents to organize regular gatherings where children can engage in spiritually enriching activities, nature walks with gratitude practices, creative projects that celebrate light and beauty, storytelling sessions that share tales of courage and wisdom from various traditions. These experiences create positive peer associations around spiritual practice. One mother in my community began hosting monthly light circles where families would gather to share spiritual practices from their various traditions. Children learned prayers in different languages, participated in healing ceremonies from diverse cultures, and discovered that spiritual awareness transcends any single belief system. The children from these families naturally gravitated toward each other, creating friendships rooted in shared values rather than superficial interests. Remember that consistency matters more than perfection in building spiritual immunity. Even 5 minutes of daily spiritual practice creates more protection than elaborate rituals performed sporadically. Choose practices your family can maintain realistically, adapting them as your children grow and your circumstances change. The beauty of spiritual immunity lies in its organic development. As your family practices regular spiritual hygiene, you'll notice increased intuition about potentially harmful influences before they enter your home. You'll find yourselves naturally drawn to environments and relationships that support your highest good, while instinctively avoiding situations that drain your spiritual energy. I want you to understand something profound. When you commit to building your family's spiritual immunity, you participate in healing that extends far beyond your household. Spiritually healthy families create ripple effects in their communities, schools, and social circles. Your children become beacons of light who naturally influence their peers toward positive choices and healthy boundaries. This work requires patience, as spiritual immunity develops gradually through consistent practice rather than dramatic interventions. Trust the process, celebrate small victories, and remember that every moment of conscious spiritual parenting plants seeds that may not flower until your children face their own challenges as adults. In our final moments together tomorrow, I will share the most crucial element of spiritual protection, the practice that seals and amplifies all other spiritual work, creating an unbreakable shield of divine love around your family. This ancient technique has protected families for generations, yet remains simple enough for any parent to master and teach their children. And now we arrive at the most sacred threshold of all, your role as guardian, not just of your own precious children, but as protector of all innocent souls who cross your path. For you see, dear ones, the knowledge I have shared with you today carries with it a profound responsibility, one that extends far beyond the walls of your own home. Listen carefully to what the spirits whisper through me now. Every parent who awakens to these hidden dangers becomes a lighthouse in the spiritual storm that rages around our children. You cannot simply close your door, secure your own family, and believe your duty is complete. The darkness I have revealed to you spreads like wildfire through neighborhoods, schools, playgrounds, wherever children gather and innocently invite these entities through games they do not understand. Think of the mother next door watching her child play this very game at this very moment, unaware that she is witnessing the slow erosion of her baby's spiritual protection. Picture the father across the street dismissing his wife's concerns about their daughter's nightmares as just imagination, not knowing that something very real has already begun to anchor itself in their home. These parents exist all around you, and they are not your enemies. They are your spiritual family, whether they know it or not. But how do you approach them? How do you share this knowledge without appearing as the crazy neighbor or the overly religious parent? This is where true spiritual wisdom reveals itself, dear ones. You do not approach with fear or dramatic warnings. You do not begin with talk of entities and spiritual warfare. Instead, you plant seeds of awareness with gentle questions and shared observations. When you see another parent struggling with their child's sudden behavioral changes, you might simply say, "I noticed something similar with my child recently. Have you paid attention to what games they've been playing?" When you witness a mother mentioning her child's disrupted sleep, you offer, "We had to make some changes to my daughter's evening routine. Sometimes the activities they engage with before bed can really affect their energy." You become a bridge between the spiritual truth and their current understanding. You meet them where they are, not where you wish they were. Remember, many of these parents are already sensing something is wrong. They feel the shift in their child's energy. They notice the increased defiance, the mysterious fears, the invisible friends their children suddenly speak about. They are hungry for answers, but they need permission to trust their instincts. This is your sacred duty, to give them that permission, to validate what their parental intuition has already begun to whisper. You say, "Trust what you're feeling. If something doesn't feel right about an activity or game, there's usually a reason." You share your own journey of discovery. "I used to dismiss these concerns as superstition, but then I started paying closer attention to the patterns in my child's behavior." But what about those who remain skeptical? What about family members who roll their eyes at spiritual nonsense, or friends who insist that it's just a game? Here is where your spiritual maturity is truly tested. You do not argue with them. You do not try to convince through debate or overwhelming them with information. Instead, you demonstrate the fruits of spiritual awareness through the transformation in your own family. When your protected children display greater emotional stability, when they sleep peacefully through the night, when they show increased kindness and clarity, others will notice. When your home becomes a sanctuary of peace, while others struggle with increasing chaos, people will quietly begin to ask questions. Your greatest persuasion tool is not your words. It is the visible evidence of spiritual protection in action. And for those family members who remain resistant, you love them anyway. You continue to pray for their awakening, but you do not compromise your children's spiritual safety to keep peace with adults who refuse to see. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is maintain firm boundaries while keeping your heart open to the moment when they become ready to hear truth. Now, I must speak to you about something the spirits have shown me with increasing urgency. This game is only the beginning. As more parents awaken to these spiritual dangers and begin protecting their children, the entities that seek to influence young minds will adapt, evolve, find new pathways of entry. This is why your vigilance cannot end with removing one game from your home. The entertainment industry, whether consciously or unconsciously, has become a primary vessel for spiritual manipulation of children. New games, apps, shows, and toys are constantly being developed, and many carry similar energetic signatures to what we have discussed today. Your children will encounter other parents who have not received this knowledge, other homes where these influences remain strong, schools where teachers unknowingly incorporate spiritually dangerous activities into classroom time. This is why I am asking you to become more than just a protective parent. I am calling you to become a guardian of innocence itself. When you see other children struggling with the effects of spiritual interference, you extend compassion and support to their families.
When you encounter adults who work with children, teachers, coaches, babysitters, you gently share your awareness about the importance of discernment in children's activities. You create ripples of protection that extend far beyond your immediate family. You support other conscious parents, creating networks of spiritual awareness within your community. You speak up at parent meetings when harmful activities are being introduced. You offer your home as a safe space where children can play games that actually nourish their spirits rather than drain them. But remember, dear ones, this calling comes with its own spiritual tests. Some will thank you for your courage in speaking truth. Others will ridicule or dismiss you. Some will even become angry, accusing you of trying to control their parenting choices. In these moments,
you must remember that your mission is not to force awakening upon others. It is to make truth available to those who are ready to receive it. The spirits whisper to me now that many of you watching have already experienced signs that your children need this protection. Perhaps you have dismissed these signs as coincidence or imagination. Perhaps you have felt alone in your concerns, wondering if you are being overly cautious or paranoid. I am here to tell you, trust what you have observed. Trust what your parental instincts have been trying to tell you. Your willingness to watch this message until this moment tells me that you are being called to this sacred work of protection. This is not coincidence. This is divine appointment. Your soul recognized the truth in what I have shared because you are meant to be part of the solution, part of the awakening that protects not just individual children, but an entire generation from spiritual harm. In these final moments, I want you to feel the weight and the honor of this calling. You have been chosen to stand between the innocent and those forces that would exploit their purity. You have been given eyes to see what others cannot yet perceive, and with this sight comes both great responsibility and tremendous spiritual power. I am asking you now to make 3 commitments. First, implement the protective measures I have shared within your own home, not just once, but as an ongoing practice of spiritual vigilance. Second, share this knowledge with at least 3 other parents who you sense might be open to receiving it. Third, remain alert for other forms of spiritual danger that may emerge in your children's environment, trusting your intuition to guide you toward truth. Before we close this sacred time together, I invite you to share in the comments below, what signs have you already noticed in your children that confirm what I have revealed today? What resistance have you encountered when trying to discuss these concerns with others? Your experiences will help other parents feel less alone in their journey towards spiritual awareness. And if this message has opened your eyes to dangers you had not previously recognized, please share this video with other parents who love their children as deeply as you do. This is not about creating fear. This is about creating awareness. It is about ensuring that no child suffers spiritual harm simply because their parents were not given access to this knowledge. May your home become a sanctuary of divine light. May your children grow in wisdom and spiritual strength. And may you find courage and community as you step into your role as guardian of the innocent. The spiritual realm watches with gratitude as you choose protection over convenience, truth over comfort, and love over fear. Go now with my blessing, and remember, you are not alone in this sacred work.